Welcome to this explainer. Listen, if you've ever felt a massive wave of intimidation wash over you the second you look at an English grammar textbook, you are definitely not alone. It sometimes feels like English just has way too many tenses, right? But today, we're setting the stage for a highly practical, step-by-step breakdown. We're going to take one of those really intimidating grammar rules and totally flip it, turning it into a tool you can actually use in real life every single day to make your stories crystal clear. Have you ever stared at the formula had plus a past participle, V3, and thought to yourself, okay, sure, I understand the rule on paper, but when do I actually use this in a normal conversation? Honestly, that confusion is completely normal. It is incredibly common to feel like you just don't have the confidence to drop it into a chat naturally. Well, I hear your frustration, and I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you're going to have a really simple, logical solution. You might even find yourself actually liking this tense a little bit. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the blurry past problem, and how we go about fixing time confusion. To really get why we need this tense in the first place, we first have to tackle the fundamental flaw of relying solely on the past simple tense when you're trying to tell a complex story. Okay, so let's dive into this by comparing a blurry past simple sentence with a crystal clear past perfect sentence side by side. Think about the phrase, when I arrived, she left. Simple enough, right? Now compare it to, when I arrived, she had left. They sound super similar, but the actual story they're telling is entirely different. This brilliantly illustrates how that first sentence completely fails to tell us who did what first. If you just say, when I arrived, she left, the order of events is totally blurry. Like, did she wait for you to arrive and then immediately walk out the door? Was she offended? It ruins the narrative flow because your listener is forced to play a guessing game with the timeline. But that second sentence, it removes all of that guesswork instantly. Which brings us to section 2, meet the earlier past, using had plus V3. Let's pivot away from that confusing problem and completely reframe this intimidating grammar rule. We're going to turn it into a highly useful everyday storytelling concept. Actually, I want you to stop thinking about this as the past perfect. Let's just banish that term completely. Instead, start thinking of it simply as the earlier past. That is literally all it is. You're just using had plus V3 to act as a giant signpost for your listener. It clearly points out which of two past actions happened first. It's just the past before the past. Now, what's really interesting here is how instantly the timeline snaps into focus once we apply that had plus V3 formula to the earlier action. Imagine the timeline. At 7:30 p.m., she had left, right? That's our earlier past. Then later at 8 p.m., I arrived, too late. The order is absolute, cause and effect are totally established, and there is absolutely zero confusion about what went down. Moving right along to section 3, storytelling and drama, establishing cause and effect. Now that we've got the mechanics down, let's look at where this tense truly shines. Because honestly, the past perfect loves a little drama. When I arrived at the party, everyone had gone home. Ouch. You can practically feel the pain in that sentence, can't you? But notice how beautifully this tense naturally organizes the cause and effect without you needing to over-explain anything. You don't have to awkwardly stumble through, well, first everyone went home, and then after that, I arrived. Nope, the grammar does all the heavy lifting for you. Let's just map out this tragedy so you can really visualize it. The party kicks off at 9 p.m. By 11 p.m., the earlier action happens. Everyone had gone. Then the main event of your story happens at 11:30 p.m. You arrive. The party is finished, the lights are out, and you're just standing there alone with a gift. The timeline is perfectly, tragically organized. And it's not just for ruined parties. The past perfect is absolutely essential for those painful, everyday, real-life moments when you suddenly realize something went horribly wrong. Like that classic, terrible, oh no moment of sudden realization and regret. Maybe when you're standing right at the front of the line at a busy cash register. I realized I had forgotten my wallet. We call this the oh no formula. The crucial takeaway here is that the mistake literally always happens first. That's exactly why the past perfect is essential for expressing sudden discoveries. Think about it. You forgot your wallet at home hours ago. That's the earlier action, so it's had forgotten. The realization, that sinking shock you feel, comes second, so that's just the past simple, I realized. Anytime you use verbs like realized, noticed, or discovered, you're almost always looking back at an earlier mistake. Just a quick side note here, look at how this exact same logic perfectly applies to reported speech. She said she had finished the project. The timeline doesn't change one bit. She finished the project first, the earlier action, and then later she spoke about it. It's the exact same pattern playing out. All right, section 4, the invisible second action, uncovering the unspoken past. Now, what about those confusing situations where a sentence seems to completely break our two-action rule? Sometimes you're going to hear a sentence that only shows one event, which can absolutely make you second-guess everything you just learned. Well, here is a huge secret. Sometimes that second past action is completely invisible. For example, you might knock on a friend's door and a neighbor pops out and tells you she had already left. Wait, there's only one action spoken. But the thing is, it's clearly understood by everyone in that conversation that the invisible second action is before you knocked on the door. It's amazing how this builds a complete timeline in our heads, even when literally half the story is left unspoken. The listener already knows the context. Your arrival is obvious, so we simply don't need to say it out loud. But the core logic of comparing an earlier past to a later past, that never changes, even if the later past is hiding in plain sight. Now, you're often going to see common signal words associated with this tense. Helper words like before, after, when, already, just, and by the time. Like, by the time we got home, it had started raining. But I want to emphatically warn you right now. These are just helpful hints. Please do not just memorize these as strict, unbreakable rules. The real key, the absolute only thing that really matters, is always understanding the order of the actions. Which perfectly brings us to section 5, when to keep it simple and knowing when to omit the past perfect entirely. This is a very important and frankly, slightly counterintuitive lesson. Now that you're a pro at how to use the past perfect, I need to teach you when you should absolutely avoid using it. Here's the deal. You don't use this tense just because you can. Consider this. After I finished work, I went home. The word after already makes the timeline perfectly obvious. First work, then home. If you said after I had finished work, I went home, it's not grammatically wrong, but it makes your English feel unnecessarily heavy and formal. If the order is already obvious to everyone, just keep it simple. Clear, simple English is always, always better than complicated English. So, to cement everything we've covered in our explainer today, here is your ultimate golden rule. It's a super simple 2-step mental check you can use every single time you tell a story. Step 1, ask yourself, did an action happen before another past action? Step 2, if the answer is yes, use had plus V3 for that earlier action. If the answer is no, just stick to the simple past. It really is that straightforward. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative challenge. Picture this. You arrive at the airport, super excited for a big trip, But you look up at the departure board and no way, the plane had already taken off. Ouch. I want you to mentally practice your own dramatic timeline for this exact scenario. What did you forget? Why were you late? Use this earlier past tense to build your story and prove to yourself that you have completely mastered the past perfect. Keep practicing those timelines in your head, and I promise this tense will become second nature in no time.